starting this session. We'll just wait 2 more minutes till 5:40. Hello, welcome all. So let's begin with the session. So every one of you might be wondering what is Dart, what is Flutter, right? So first of all, meet our speakers for the day. Myself, Abhay Ubhade. I am the Flutter facilitator for this program and also app developer lead at GDSC VJTI. Along with me, sitting right now in CCF1 in VJTI campus, is Prasad Thakare. He was an Android facilitator. So he will be conducting the today's introduction to Dart. So, सबसे पहला सवाल, many of you might be in first year, right? Or many of you might be from non-CSIT branches जिनको कोडिंग में जर्नी शुरू करना है. So सबका सवाल एकदम कॉमन, लेकिन मुझे तो कोडिंग आता नहीं है, तो मैं ऐप डेवलपमेंट कैसे करूँ, राइट? So this was literally me in my FY. So ये सेशन ऐसा है कि this requires no prerequisite of any kind, no knowledge of any prior languages. We'll be teaching you everything from scratch here. All right. So what is Flutter? Now this entire program is based on Flutter. इसका नाम ही Flutter Festival है. So what is Flutter? Flutter, first of all, is a Google technology, okay? So Flutter is something in which we can make applications. Now, the very main advantage of Flutter is what I will be telling you after explaining what is cross-platform frameworks, okay? So till now, now we will just skip this slide and we'll revisit this slide once again. Now, what is Dart? So Dart is a language in which we write code so that we can use it in Flutter. Okay, so Flutter is a framework built in Dart language. Now, what is cross-platform and what Flutter do, or how is Flutter a cross-platform framework and what is a cross-platform framework? Okay, so इसके पीछे एक बहुत ऐसा जुना पुराना स्टोरी है, अच्छा खासा. So पहले क्या होता था कि जब भी as a company, let's say you as a developer wants to make an XYZ app, okay, and so in earlier days everyone used to make two applications, one in Android using Kotlin or Java, and one in iOS using Swift. So because there was no technology at that point where you can write code only once and run on both the platforms. Okay, so you had to make two different apps in different languages. वहाँ पे तुम्हारा डेवलपर का खर्चा बढ़ता था, तुम्हारा कॉस्टिंग बढ़ता था. Then you had to sync both the apps with the same database because database तो same होगा. Then you had, if you want to give new updates to the application, then you had to give updates to both of them. So and UI का भी changes, अगर UI भी दोनों तरफ बहुत same रखना होता है because एक ही ऐप है तो same दिखना चाहिए. And one general way that some local developers follow was that they just don't make iOS application, but then as a company or as a professional, you cannot just bail out on iOS users, right? Because they are very limited in number. So there was a generation of Flutter in Google. So Flutter, what is Flutter? You just write code only once in Dart language, and Flutter will take care of it to run on both Android and iOS. But this was the scenario when Flutter was invented. Okay, now with the same code base, you can make the same application in the form of a website, as well as a Windows application, as well as a Linux application or a Mac OS application. So you just code once and your application runs on all these platforms: Android, iOS, Linux, Windows, and Mac. All right, so this is what is called as cross-platform framework. Now coming back to what is Flutter. So Flutter is a huge bunch of code. All right, so some of you, those who have prior knowledge in development or in coding, they might know, they might have heard things like React.js, or in web, right? In React.js, AngularJS. So these are all frameworks written in JavaScript language. Similarly, Flutter is a framework, or framework is basically a whole bunch of code written which you can directly use. Okay, so Flutter is a framework written in Dart language. And for those who already have some basic knowledge about C++ or JavaScript or Python, okay, I will come to that part again. But C++ or JavaScript, if you know, then learning Dart would be a piece of cake for you guys. Okay, so a heads up, the syntax of Dart is very similar to C++, and it has some functions which resembles a few functions from Python. Okay, so you can see that also here. So चलिए फिर शुरू करते हैं. Handing over the presentation to Prasad Thakare.
Hello, I believe I must be audible now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let's get started with, I have no prior experience with any programming language. Okay, so there are about 16 people. Yeah, amazing. So welcome to the session. I will try my best to go from the very basic of what programming is. So, okay, yeah, you can put your hands down. Let's get started. So, to get started with what programming is basically we are giving some instructions to the computer in a language that we as humans can understand, and we are writing some instructions in that language and giving it to the computer. The computer will then do something with those instructions, and there are many steps that are involved in between. It will basically compile that language and then execute the instructions that we give to the computer. So that is what programming is. So as I said, the first thing that we do when we start with the programming language is we are introduced to variables. So what are variables? Variables basically, they represent a location in the memory. They have the reference to a memory location. So for example, if I want to store some data in a memory location, I will just declare a variable and give that piece of data to that variable. So each variable has an associated data type, which shows the nature of the data that is held by that variable. For example, if you are aware with C programming, you may know that the number of data types that are supported by C. For example, there is int, float, char. But in Dart, we have a data type var. So var actually is more like a wildcard data type. You can use it with any type of variable. And apart from that, we have some specific data types like int, double, string, and bool. We don't have float in Dart. So like in case I use var to declare a variable, so I won't be able to change the type of that variable later. We'll see that when we get to the coding part. So like this is a new thing that you learn in Dart, that is const and final variables. So for example, if I declare a variable that is a location in the memory and I don't want to change that variable anytime in the future, that is I want it to remain constant. So for that, I'll make use of const or final. So here are some rules that we define, that have been defined. So for variable naming, the name of the variable should like all the keywords that are defined in the language. For example, there is int. Int is a keyword. It is a data type. So you cannot use it to name a variable. And then the variable name can start only with an alphabet and not with a digit. If you want to put a digit, it should be followed. It should follow the alphabets, and no other special characters are allowed other than underscore. Also, white spaces are not allowed in the variables. So here is an example of the program. So there is this website that is dartpad.dev. So I will be coding on that website. So I encourage that you all also code along with me. So I'll post this link in the chat. Agishri, yes, we are recording the session. So let's get back. So I will first declare some variables. So what this void main is, I'll get to that later on when we'll be covering functions. So for now, let's just focus on variables. So the first type of variable is var. So var is a wildcard data type. So it can support any data, any nature of data that I give it. For example, var a equals to 12. What I have done is basically I have created a variable a which is of type var, and whenever I assign it a value that is 12, the Dart compiler will itself understand that I am trying to store an integer value, and so a will be assigned a type int. Now what I meant is I said here that the data type of the variable which is declared using var cannot be changed later in the code. Hello. Pranav, can you mute? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So what I said is that whenever I declare a variable using the keyword var, I won't be able to change its data type in the future. For example, if I give it a string data type or a double, that is a decimal pointer number. So it will just show me a compile time exception that the type of a is int and I'm trying to give it another value of type double. So that won't be allowed. So once the data type is declared, I won't be able to change it later on. So this was an example for var. I can also do int. To be more specific, I can also do int and give it an integer value, 123. Apart from that, we have double c equals to 45.67. Double is used to store decimal values. Then we have string is. So for string, the value should always be inside double quotations. You can single quotations are also supported, but it is more of a standard that when you're trying to store strings or when you're trying to represent strings, it should be inside double quotation. So I'll use double quotations and I'll just put ABCD. Another type we have is bool. So bool can hold values like only true and false. So bool d equals to true. I can run this. So nothing is being run because I'm just initializing the variables just now. I can even use the print function to print any of the variables onto the screen. So if I try to print S, so it should print ABCD. Also, each and every statement that you write, it should be followed by a semicolon, just like C or C++. So now that I have printed C and run the command, it will print ABCD on the screen. So that was all for variables. I'll also give a demo for const or final variables. Now, the purpose of const is that I shouldn't be able to change its value again. So const equals to 45. And now I'm trying to change the value of A to be 67. So if I try to run this, okay, A is already declared. So this is showing me an error that a const value cannot be reassigned again in the code. So similarly, you can do with final. The only difference between const and final variable is that if I try to reinitialize a const variable, the error will be shown at the runtime. For example, now that I could see this is during the compile time. So using const, the error can be seen during the compile time, as we can see here. Now, if I use final, so I shouldn't be able to see the error. Okay. Okay, so you can just consider them to be similar. That is, the value that we assign to either a const or final variable cannot be changed anywhere in the code again. So we covered the rules. Now let's look at the control flow statements. So what is a control flow statements? They are those parts or those statements in the code that are used to control the flow of execution of the code. For example, there are different types of control flow statements. We have an if-else statement, we have loops. And apart from that, we also have break and continue. We have switch case and assert. We'll be looking at each one of them one at a time. So first, let's start with the if-else statement. Okay. So what an if-else statement is that if I define or if I write an if-else statement like this, inside the if block, there should be a condition. And this is where we write the code that needs to be executed in case the condition is true. For example, if that is in case the condition 1 is true, the code that is defined inside, that is over here, this will run. And once this code runs, this entire block will be skipped. That is, no further code will be seen. And if condition 1 is false, it will then check condition 2. And if condition 2 is true, then this code will run. And the compiler won't look at the further code that is written. And if all the conditions are false, the code that is written in the else part will be executed. So there is a small exercise. There is a small exercise that I have written. So we have to check whether a number is a multiple of 2 or 5 or both. So how we will do that is, let's consider an int n. I'll just give it the value 12. So I want to check whether this number is a multiple of 2 or 5 or both. So if n mod 2 equals to 0 and n mod 5 equals to 0, then I'll just print that n is a multiple of both 2 and 5. Now else if n mod 2 equals to 0, I'll print n is a multiple of only 2. Else, in case both these conditions are false, like n mod 2 is not equal to 0 and n mod 5 is also not equal to 0, then it will look at this, if whether only n mod 2 is equal to 0. And if even that is false, it will skip to the else part. So here I will print n is a else if n mod 5 equal to 0, I'll print n is a multiple of only 5. And if none of these conditions are true, that means n is neither a multiple of 2 nor a multiple of 5. So I can print this. Or 5. So for now, the only code I have is a single statement. So there is no need to give brackets. But in case I have multiple code statements, it is necessary to give brackets. So I encourage that you all give these brackets, because it is easier for the reader to understand what code is written. So I can just run this code. So as I have given 12, n is only a multiple of 2. So that was all for the if-else statement. Now let's go on with the loops. So in case I want to repeat a specific task some number of times, like say I want to do it 5 times, I can just copy and paste that piece of code 5 times and then run the code normally. But if I want to like execute some piece of code 100 times or 1000 times, so in that case I'll make use of loops. So there are basically three kinds of loops. There is a for loop, a while loop, and a do while loop. So this is the syntax of the for loop. So in this section we have a variable I, which is first initialized to 0. You can initialize I to any number, and till the time I is less than n, this loop will continue running. And after each iteration of this loop, I am basically incrementing the value of I by 1 using I++. So I++ is an incrementing operator. It increments the value of a variable by 1. So that was the for loop. In while loop, this is the syntax. In these round brackets, we have the condition. So as long as this condition is true, this loop will continue to run. And in the do while loop, first we have this do keyword, and then we have the while and condition. So what makes this different from the other two loops is that do while is an exit control loop. That is, whenever the compiler encounters a do while loop, it will run whatever code is written inside at least once. So after the code is run once, it will then check the condition. If the condition is true, it will repeat that code again, else it will exit this block. So I'll give a demo of all these three loops. I have considered an exercise over here that we should first consider a number n and check whether all the numbers from 1 to n are multiples of 2 or 5 or both. So how we do that? This piece of code is to check whether a single integer n is a multiple of 2 or 5 or both. So we just have to add a loop. We just have to add all this part inside a loop. So first I'll add a for loop. The problem statement here is that we are considering a number n and we have to check all the numbers from 1 to n, that is 1 to 12. And we have to segregate those numbers and we have to allot them whether they are a multiple of 2 or they are a multiple of I, or they are a multiple of both or neither. So for I equals to 1, I less than 12, I less than equal to n. So this will start at 1 and end when I is greater than n. That is when I equals to 13, this loop will end. So this loop will run 12 times. And all I have to do is paste this code inside this loop. And just indent this a little bit. Also add brackets. In case you are having any doubts, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can put in the chat. I'll be continuously looking at the chats. Okay, so I have added this section inside the loop, and instead of n, I put I everywhere. Now one more thing I would like to do here is that instead of printing n is a multiple of 2 and 5, I would like to print the number that I am checking. So for that, we make use of something known as interpolation. That is embedding a variable inside a string. So how we do that is, I will first a $sign, then a curly bracket, and inside this curly bracket, I enter the variable that I want to print. So I want to print I. So I'll do this everywhere instead of n. So that is all. I'll recheck this one. Yes, okay. And now I can run this code. So as you can see, 1 is neither a multiple of 2 or 5, 2 is a multiple of only 2, 3 is neither a multiple of 2 nor 5, 4 is a multiple of only 2, 5 is a multiple of only 5. So this basically is iterating through each and every number from I equals to 1, that is 1 to n, that is n is, which is 12. And after each iteration, it is incrementing the value of I. So once I equals to 13, this condition will be false. That is I less than equal to n is false. And that's when this loop will end. Now I can also do I less than n. So in case of I less than n, when I equals n equals to 12, or when I equals to 12, 12 less than n is 12. So 12 less than 12 is false. So this loop will run only 11 times. As you can see, the last number to be checked is 11. So that was the exercise in the loops part. You can try this using while and do while loop. I will just explain the basics of those two loops. In case of while loop, like if I have int I equals to 0. So while I is less than 12, say I want to print and like if I just run this code like this, how many times will this loop run? This is my question. So you can put that in the chat. I will repeat the question. If I have this code, I equals to 0, I is less than 12 and print hello. So how many times will this loop run? Yeah, exactly, Soumya. I forgot to add I plus plus. So how while loop runs is that it will keep on running the loop as long as this condition is true. Now I equals to 0 and 0 is less than 12. So this will always be true. So this loop will never terminate. So to terminate this loop, I will have to increment this value of I. Now this loop will run 12 times. That is I equals to 0, it will run once. Then I plus this will increment this value of I to 1. Now I is 1, 1 is still less than 12. So like this it will keep on running till I is 12. So once I is 12, 12 less than 12 is false. So this loop will break. So you can print this. Okay. Now we'll have a look at the do while loop. So in do while loop we have a do keyword first and then while a condition, that is I is less than say 0. Now I'm printing. So how many times will this loop run? If you are familiar with do while loops, how many times will this loop run? I'll indent this a bit. Yes, exactly. Kalyani and yeah. So this loop will run once. Why? Because this is an exit control loop. That is first it will encounter this statement, it will print hello. And then it will check the condition, that is I is less than 0, which is false. So it won't repeat this piece of code again. I will run this. It will run only once. So that was all for the loops. You can do the same question using both the loops. Both the loops are as powerful as the for loop. So you can try the question in multiple loops. Now let's have a look at the break and continue statement. So these are exclusively used inside of the loops, any loop. So the purpose of this statement is that whenever a break statement is encountered, the loop is instantly terminated. That is, no further iterations will run. And in case I encounter a continue statement, the current iteration will be skipped and we will move on with the next iteration. That is, I have given these two pieces of code. I will just copy paste these. So what do you think will be the output of this code? Whenever a continue statement is encountered, this loop will skip the, it will basically skip the iteration where I mod 4 equals to 0. So what do you think is the output of this code? I will wait for a minute till 6:13. Four. No. Okay, so let's see. We have 1, 2, and 3. So why? Because whenever first I is 0, I is first initialized with 0 and 0 is less than 5. So this iteration will run. 0 mod 4 equals to 0. This is a true statement. So this continue statement will run. So what I said is that whenever continue statement is encountered, the current iteration is skipped. So I equals to 0 is skipped. So anything after this, after the continue statement won't run. So it's like ये continue पे आ गया And whenever continue happens, it will skip to I equals to 1 and restart from the first statement of the loop. So I equals to 0, this condition is true. We see the continue statement. As soon as it sees the continue statement, it will jump to I equals to 1 and नीचे का कुछ भी execute नहीं होगा. When I equals to 1, 1 mod 4 is not equal to 0. So we don't encounter the continue statement. That is why it gets printed as 1. Now we have 2. So 2 mod 4 equals to 0, false again. So encountered, so print पे आया and it printed 2. The same is with 3. We don't encounter the continuous statement. That is why it is printed. Now I equals to 4. So 4 mod 4 is 0. We see the continuous statement. The current iteration will be skipped. So I equals to 5 पे चला गया and it will start from the first statement. So but when I equals to 5, this condition is false. 5 less than 5 is false. So ये पूरा loop ही exit हो जाएगा. So no further iterations will happen. That is why only 1, 2 and 3 are printed. That was all about the continue part. Now let's look at the break statement. So this is very easy to understand. That is whenever a break statement is encountered, the loop will terminate then and there. No further statements will be run. So what do you think will be the output of this code? I have just replaced continue with break. Nothing exactly. So whenever I equals to 0, like it will start with I equals to 0. So 0 mod 4 equals to 0, ये तो true हो गया. So it will execute break. And whenever break is executed, this loop will terminate then and there. So print I कभी execute ही नहीं होगा. और आगे के iterations भी नहीं होंगे. That is why nothing will be printed. So that was about the break and continue statements. Now let's look at the switch case. So this is ये switch case C में भी देखा होगा. The thing is, I have never used switch case in my entire life till now. I have done almost like around 10 programming languages and never have I ever used switch case, neither in programming nor in development. But as it is defined, it is necessary that we study about that. So I'll just copy paste this code. So what this is, it is basically a if-else ladder. If-else ladder समझ लो इसे कि मैंने पहले A को कुछ value assign किया, ये string. So now I am doing switch. So what this further body will do is that this will consider the value of A, that is some value string में. And now it will check whether this matches this case. So case ASDF. Is ASDF equal to this string? False. It is false, so this won't be executed. Now it will check the next case. Case QWERTY. So is QWERTY equal to this? It is not. So it will skip to the next case. So अगला case ही नहीं है. I have defined a default case. So what default case is that अगर कोई भी ऊपर का case नहीं execute हुआ, so it will execute the default case. So it will print default case. I can print this. So it printed default case. But the thing is, अगर मैंने किसी भी एक ऊपर के केस में some value डाल दिया, So it will check whether the value of A is equal to this case. This case is being satisfied. Yes, it is. So it will print this value, print case 1, and then it will break out of this block. And आगे के cases won't be checked. So yeah, so case 1, it is satisfying case 1, so case 1 print over. Now that these break statements are important. So what will happen if I don't put these break statements? Anyone would like to tell me what will happen if I don't? Acha, okay, error aa raha hai. In case of C, if you don't use these break statements, what will happen is that all cases will be checked. That is case ये भी check होगा, ये भी check होगा, but in that यहाँ पे it is showing an error, so never mind. So one last thing is, if you can observe this, this is basically an if else ladder. अगर मुझे इसी का same if else लिखना होगा, तो if A equals to ASDF, I'll do something. Else if A equals to some quality, I'll do something. And default case is nothing but else block. So else my print default case. So this just translates to this. So it is better if you know which case. First year वालों अगर तुम्हारा programming tutorial होगा आगे, so you'll have to make a calculator using this switch case. You'll have this experiment later on using C++. So it is better if you know this. Now let's look at the assert statement.
Excuse me, I had a doubt. When you were teaching the switch case in the PPT, you had put the string in a single quotation. So is that the syntax is allowed, or do we need to put a string in the double quotation like C++ or Python?
Actually, the standard is that you should put string in double quotation. So it would be better if you use double quotation.
Yeah, so that's just I'm confirming, like single quotation is allowed or not. Is that allowed, the thing you just did?
Yeah, it is allowed. It is not showing any compilation error, I guess. दिखा रहा है. In some places it is showing, in some places it is not, but it is always advisable that we use double quotations in case of a string.
Okay, thank you.
So let's look at the assert statement. What this will do is कि break देखा था, whenever break is encountered, the loop is terminated. Whenever assert is encountered and this condition is false, the entire program is terminated. And whatever message you will pass here, that message will be shown as an error. So I'll do this, remove this. So like assert. And here I'll put a condition, that is 0 is greater than 1. And here I'll put a message. I'll add 0 is not greater. So what this will do is that it will first check this condition. In case this condition is false, the entire program is terminated and this message will be shown as an error. What is the issue?
प्रिंट वगैरह कुछ नहीं किया तो वो
Okay. So अभी 0 is greater than 1, this is false. So as this is false, ये जो भी message मैंने pass किया है, it is shown as an error. Assertion failed and 0 is not greater than 1. So when you will be developing apps, you can use this assert feature. So that this is very simple to understand. So the message is a string, and in case the condition is false, the code execution will halt and the message will be displayed. अगर मैंने इसके नीचे कुछ print भी डाल दिया, print hello, so this won't run. So this print won't run because यहीं पे code execution खत्म हो गया. So it is done. Now let's move on to functions. So what is a function? A function is a block of organized code that is used to perform a task. So a function is called, so I would like to first clarify this definition. A function is a block of code. तो अगर जैसे मैं यहाँ पे लिख रहा हूँ, ये जो void main है, this consists of some block of code that is performing a task. So this void main is a function, and the way we define a function is first we give a return type. So in this case it is void. Void means that the function is not returning anything. So what it means that the function is returning anything, I will explain that shortly. So first it is a return. First we have a return type, then we have a function name, and then we have parameters that are passed in round braces, and then we have the function body. So ये तो main function था. Main is basically an exclusive function. It cannot return anything, but it will be called the ये सबसे पहले call होगा whenever the program is executed. So I'll define another function. I have this exercise, that is write a function to add two numbers and return their sum. So I'll name it. First I'll have a data type. So in this case I'm returning the sum of two numbers or two integers to be specific. So the function is going to return an integer value. So the return type is int. I can name the function anything, but I'll name it add. And then we are passing in parameters in round braces. What are parameters? Parameters are basically values or data values that you're passing to that function from outside. So I'm having two values, int a and int b. So ये हो गया. This is I have defined a function. Okay. So this is going to return an int. So I can have an int c equals to a plus b, and I will return c. तो ये कोड जो है ये कंपाइल तो हो जाएगा, but if I want to execute this code, I'll have to explicitly call this inside the main function. How will I do that? Add है ना इस function का नाम, so I'll just do add. I'll do add. I'll pass in two numbers, that is I want 1 and 2. I'll print it. So this add is supposed to accept these two numbers a and b. So यहाँ पे मैंने 1 and 2 pass किया है. This 1 will be assigned to a and this 2 will be assigned to b. And ये function क्या करेगा? उनका sum compute करेगा, एक c variable में store करेगा, and then it will return that c. So what does it mean that it will return c? Whenever this code is executed, ये जो value return करेगा, it will basically be placed instead of this add 1, 2. So whenever 1 and 2 is added, यहाँ पे 3 आएगा, and that 3 will be printed. So I can print this. So it is printing 3. A function can return any data type. So if I want to return a string, I can do that as well. So I'll just change the name from add to thumb, and it won't accept any parameters. or we can do that it will accept a string name, and I'll change the name of the function to greet. And this will return a string that is good morning. And then I'll embed this name, whatever I have accepted inside this function, I will embed this inside the string. So the way we embed is first a dollar sign, then the curly braces, and then the variable name. Okay, so the data type is int. I need to change this to string. So whatever data type I'm returning over here, it should match with this return type. Now I'll just call greet. So, and I pass in a new. I'm passing my name. So I'll run this. So this name I'm passing, this will be assigned to this name variable over here, and this will embed, this function will embed that name inside the string good morning, and it will return the result, that is good morning Prasad. So this was all about functions and return types. So it is also possible that your function doesn't have a return type. It is not necessary that it should have, but if you are giving it a return type, say string or anything, or a well-defined return type, then it should have a return statement. That is, it should return some value. But if I'm giving it a return type of void, in that case, अगर मैंने return नहीं किया तो भी चलेगा. But as this won't be returning anything, there is no use printing anything. I'll just call greet. I'll pass in my name. And अगर मुझे वो शो करना है स्क्रीन पे तो मैं यहाँ नीचे प्रिंट करवा दूंगा. Print good morning. So same result है. So if you are following very closely, this is very much similar to C. मतलब ऐसे लगेगा कि almost same ही C जैसे सब void main वगैरह. The only difference is the data type. यहाँ पे string है, C में string नहीं है, C++ में है. But यहाँ पे caps का ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा. String का S is capital. So that was all about functions. Now let's look into list, set and map. So first list. तो अगर मुझे 100 डेटा पॉइंट्स चाहिए अपने कोड में, बाय डेटा पॉइंट आई मीन दैट अगर मुझे मेरे क्लास के सारे बच्चों का नाम कलेक्ट करना है in a program, so I won't make 100 different variables for all of them. What I'll do is I'll create a list. In C++, this is very much similar to arrays, but in Dart, the length of list is dynamic. That is, I'll demonstrate it. The name of the list is ls, and we define it using these brackets. So in ls, during runtime, I can add any value. So I want to add, say, my name. I can add Abhay's name. Similarly, I can add many names. In the end, I can print it. So now if I want to access any specific element, that is मुझे सिर्फ अपने नाम को देखना है. मेरा नाम कुछ गलत डल गया, so I want to edit that name. So what I'll do that is, there is something known as indexing in case of lists. So that is हर element का एक number होता है associated, and list works with zero-based indexing. That is, the first element in the list will have the index 0. And the subsequent will have 1, 2, 3 and so on. So अगर मुझे first element देखना है, I'll just do ls0 and say I want to give some different name. I'll put Aryan over here. and then I'll print ls. So now it is Aryan and Abhay. So I can also see the length, that is the number of children in the class, using the length, dot length. It gives the length of the list, that is the number of elements that are stored in that list. So in this case it is 2. So it is 2. So now another thing over here is that this list can store the data of any different type. जैसे अभी मैंने first 2 यहाँ पे string store किया. अब मुझे एक integer store करना है, so I can do that as well. ls.add 23, ls.add, I'll store a double value 23.567 something. I'll store a boolean value ls.add 2, and in the end I can print ls. So all these values are stored in the list. So this is very much similar to Python if you are familiar with that. Else, okay, it's okay. So that was all about list. One more thing is that अगर मुझे I want to enforce the list to store only one type of data. That is अगर string है तो मुझे सिर्फ string type का ही data store करना है. अगर कोई और data enter किया तो मुझे error show करना है. So how I will do that is यहाँ पे मैं एंगुलर बेसिस में इंट लिख दूंगा. तो अगर मुझे इंट स्टोर करना है तो सिर्फ इंट ही स्टोर होगा यहाँ पे, दैट इज सिर्फ 23 स्टोर होगा. बाकी इस पे इट विल शो मी कंपाइल टाइम एरर. मुझे सिर्फ स्ट्रिंग स्टोर करना है, सो आई विल पुट स्ट्रिंग. अब ये सब देखिए फाइनली अभी सिर्फ प्रसाद एंड अभय विल बी शोन ओवर हियर. So we learned about lists, that is they have dynamic size. I can go on adding elements to this list and its size will keep on increasing. So how it increases, you don't need to be worried about that. But अगर तुम C++ तुम्हें पता होगा, so what happens is initially the size of the list is 1. So I am adding Prasad. So now the list is full. So the compiler will detect that. And what will happen is list का size double हो जाएगा, 1 का 2 हो जाएगा. Again the list is half full, 50% full है, so again the list will double its size, 2 से 4. So whenever the list is half full, वो list का size double हो जाएगा. So this is actually something known as amortized cost. So you will see this later on when you will do DSA in further sessions, in further semesters of college. So that was all about lists. So here is an exercise. Create a dynamic size list and add first 100 numbers to it. So this is very simple. It is actually a good practice if you are being specific about what data type you want to store in the list. क्योंकि बाद में अगर कोड debug करने में भी आसानी होगी. So I'll iterate through the first 100 numbers. I less than equal to 100. Plus. I'll do ls.add I. At the end, I'll print ls. So if you see, यहाँ पे 100 numbers have been added to the list. Okay, so we covered all this. We saw that there's this concept of indexing. So list, almost all the data structures follow zero-based indexing. That is, the first element is 0 and the last element would be the length of the list minus 1. अगर ये element हो गया 0 and the length is 100, so the last element will have the index of 99. So that was all about lists. Now let's look at sets. So sets are basically just like mathematical sets. If अगर पढ़ा होगा, so sets store unique data values. So while defining sets, it is necessary that we define the data type. So var s equals to, I'll create a set of integers And to create a set, I need to give this curly braces. So अगर मैं int I equals to 0, I less than 10, I plus plus, this loop will run 10 times और मैं इस s में 10 बार एक ही नंबर ऐड कर रहा हूँ, say 1. I'll print s. So what do you think will be printed? Or I should ask, what are the contents of the set after this loop? I will wait for a minute. No one? One will be printed 10 times. Okay. Can we declare array by these curly braces? No, we cannot. Actually, curly braces का मतलब है कि we are defining a map. So what is map will look later. But हम ये कर रहे हैं ना, यहाँ पे int दे रहे हैं, तो that means that we are declaring a set. अगर array declare करना है तो उसके लिए ये ऐसे brackets, square brackets देने पड़ेंगे. Set के लिए curly braces. Yes, exactly, Advait. 1 is printed only once. As I said that the set is supposed to contain only unique values. So this loop will run 10 times. मैंने 10 बार s में 1 ऐड किया, so it will contain only 1 1. अगर मैंने एक इसमें मैंने अब 10 बार 1 ऐड किया और s डॉट ऐड मैंने एक बार 2 किया, this will show 1 and 2 क्योंकि 1 and 2 are distinct, so it will show only distinct elements. So those are sets. This is a very important data structure. If you are going into CP and all, sets, maps, and lists, they will be very abundantly used. So that was all about sets. Now let's look at maps. So maps basically consist of key value pairs. That is, if in a class we have roll number 1 corresponding to roll number 1, we have one person. Corresponding to roll number 2, we have another person, and so on. So all the roll numbers are unique, and corresponding to those, all the children are also unique. That is the same case. The map works very similar to that. Here the logic is that the key values, that is the roll numbers, just an example here, the roll numbers or the key values, they should be unique. For example, var n equals to, now if I want to define a map, I'll have to provide here two data types. That is, I am mapping an integer to say a string. And उसके लिए भी same ये curly braces देने पड़ते हैं. This is capital. तो ये similar है set के declaration जैसा, but the only difference is that here I am passing two different data types. I can also pass int and int, but हमने class का example लिया था, so let's stick with this example. So I'll add a few people in there, and one equals to say A. The name of first student is A. Second student is B. Name third student is C. Now again I'm naming name of third student to D. So what happens is that, as I said, ये है key values. 1 is mapped to A, 2 is mapped to B, 3 is mapped to C. बट यहाँ पे मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ, एक दूसरा वैल्यू असाइन कर रहा हूँ 3 को, तो पहला वाला ओवरराइट हो जाएगा. दोनों नहीं एग्जिस्ट कर सकते, ओनली यूनिक की वैल्यूज विल एग्जिस्ट इनसाइड द मैप. सो एट द एंड आई एम प्रिंटिंग m. So 1 is mapped to A, 2 is mapped to B, पहले 3C को मैप था, बट जब मैंने M3 इक्वल टू D किया तब 3D से मैप हो गया. And now I printed the map. Can also print get these values, that is the string corresponding to the key. I can get the value corresponding to every key in constant time. So if I do print M of 1, then I should get A. Also if I do M of 4, 4 तो है ही नहीं, so what will get printed? Let's see. So this is printing null, क्योंकि 4 है ही नहीं इस मैप में. Also if I want to search whether a key exists, अगर 1 exist कर रहा है इस मैप में, so I can only search for keys inside a map. I can't search for values. So if 1 is existing inside the map, so that will also take constant time. उसके लिए we have some function that is .find. I will send a documentation of this and you can refer to all the further functions that are defined on each of these data structures. So this was the basics of maps. If you have any query, you can always ask. So this is the last section of today's session, that is anonymous functions. So what anonymous functions are की, इससे पहले जब हम function define करते थे, we were giving them a particular name. But now we won't be giving them any name. So how will we use this? So say I have a function which is not returning anything. Or I can just copy paste this piece of code. So I have defined this function variable. So function, I'll just give it a return type of void. Actually, if you don't even give a return type, it will be implicitly, like implicit, the compiler will find out what the return type is. If I'm not returning anything, it will be void. And if I'm returning an integer, अपने आप the compiler will understand whether return type is int. So it is not necessary that you put a return type, but it is always advisable कि कोई अगर तुम्हारा code देख रहा है, तो वो function देखते से he should understand what the function is returning. So it is always advisable that you put the return type. So I have created this function func, and inside this I'm giving this a parameter, say f2. So this f2 over here is a function. That is, I'm passing a function to another function in its parameters. And in the body, what I'm doing is f2 तो function है, तो मैं अभी क्या कर रहा हूँ, f2 को call कर रहा हूँ. So how will I pass this function inside a function? So firstly, I would like to पहले normal देखते हैं जो हमने अभी तक सीखा है. So var a, I'll just print. ये मैंने एक फंक्शन डिफाइन कर दिया यहाँ पे. यहाँ पे मेन में आई एम कॉलिंग दैट फंक्शन. हाउ डू आई कॉल इट? func, and I'll just send a variable in here, say 1. यहाँ पे क्या होगा? मेन विल बी एग्जीक्यूटेड फर्स्ट. ये func को मैंने इन्वोक किया. 1 is sent inside this variable 1. So a is given the value of 1, and I'm printing this inside this print statement inside this function. So 1 will be printed. But now what I want to do is that I don't want to pass a data variable. I want to pass a function to this function func. So how will I do that? I will do that using anonymous functions. So anonymous function कैसे होते हैं? अभी पहले कैसे हम नेम देते थे, रिटर्न टाइप नेम एंड देन दिस ब्रैकेट्स. I won't do that. I'll just first start with these round brackets and then सीधा body उसकी function की. And inside this function, whatever I want the function to be, print hello. अब ये एक function है. I just copy and paste this function. So if you're familiar, this is comment. This is known as a comment block. So this code, this is not a code. The compiler will skip over whatever is written in this block. So this is the function. This is the body of the function, and here I have the parameters. So abhi ke liye I am not putting any parameters. And what this function is supposed to do is print hello. तो ये फंक्शन मैंने पास किया यहाँ पे इस फंक को. ये फंक था, मैंने इसके अंदर वो फंक्शन पास किया, फिर पेस्ट कर दिया इसको यहाँ पे. एंड नाउ ये फंक्शन का वैल्यू और ये फंक्शन असाइन हुआ ए को. अब मुझे ए को एग्जीक्यूट करना है. तो अब फंक्शन को एग्जीक्यूट कर कैसे करते हैं, इसको कॉल करके सीधा. So this is I'm invoking this function A. So this will print hello. If you can see over here. Now, अगर मुझे इसमें parameters introduce करने हैं, so I'll just pass in a string, and instead of printing hello, I will print a name. So what is happening is ये फंक्शन मैंने डिफाइन किया, ये मैं यहाँ पे पेस्ट कर देता हूँ. दिस इज अ फंक्शन. ये फंक्शन है, ये फंक्शन मैंने यहाँ पे पास किया, इसकी वैल्यू मिली इस वेरिएबल ए को. एंड नाउ आई एम कॉलिंग दैट फंक्शन ए. अब ए को कॉल करने के लिए आई नीड टू पास इन सम स्ट्रिंग ओवर हियर बिकॉज ए इज दिस फंक्शन. So I'll pass in the name Prasad. And what it will do is it will print the name. So it printed the name Prasad. So this function over here, जो नीचे वाला है, which is accepting another function as its parameter. ये यहाँ पे function है. So this is known as a higher order function. क्योंकि ये parameter में ही ये एक function दे रहा है. इसलिए func is a higher order function. So this is what I have written over here. So this is another piece of code that I have. I will run it. So there are some inbuilt higher order function that is for each. So for each क्या करता है? Every list, अगर मैंने एक list define की, तो उस list के साथ एक for each function करके attached आता है. And what this for each function accepts is another function, and in that function whatever I have done, whatever computations I have written, those will be performed on each and every element inside this list. तो जैसे यहाँ पे मैंने for each में एक function पास किया item. It is an anonymous function, and inside the parameters it is fetching an item. और यहाँ पे एक और आउटपुट करके मैंने डिफाइन किया, एंड इट इज वो आइटम को स्क्वायर कर रहा है और इस आउटपुट के अंदर पुश कर रहा है. इट इज एडिंग दैट वैल्यू टू दिस आउटपुट लिस्ट, एंड एट द एंड आई एम प्रिंटिंग आउटपुट. सो इफ आई प्रिंट दिस, ये फॉर ईच लूप ये फंक्शन हर एक एलिमेंट पे रन करेगा 1 2 3 एंड 4, और उसका स्क्वायर करके ये आउटपुट में ऐड करेगा. So if you see, 1 square is 1, 2 square is 4, 3 square is 9 and 4 square is 16. So हर एक एलिमेंट को उसने स्क्वायर किया और आउटपुट के अंदर ऐड किया. So here जो for each function है, it is a higher order function. So that was all about these anonymous functions. अभी कुछ ज़्यादा समझ नहीं आया होगा, बट अगर तुम और इसमें थोड़ा देखोगे, नेट पे सर्च करोगे, there is this that का documentation. It's very well written. No, not this. Okay, yeah. So the one that Abhay has sent, so a tour of the Dart language. So ये पूरा Dart का documentation है, and it is all sorted content wise. तो अगर कुछ पढ़ना है, anonymous function पढ़ना है, तो यहाँ पे section है. तो यहाँ पे पूरा उसका syntax के साथ दिया हुआ है. So you can refer to this. ये जो for each मैंने अभी सिखाया. So I encourage that you all go through this documentation. थोड़ा थोड़ा नहीं समझेगा, but reading the documentation is a very good habit that you should develop. And so that was all for this session. If you have any doubts, you can always ask them in the chat. Abhi we will stay here for some time. We'll be wrapping up with the session. The session has ended for now, but if you have any more doubts, you can put them in the chat or unmute yourself. So that is all from my side. Thank you so much, Abhay. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to my PPT. We'll be here for your doubts.
Yes, we would be using Dart language code in Flutter. Yes, definitely, we will be sharing PPTs.
So Soumya, your question is where exactly we use anonymous function in the last field. So let me present my screen again. So last code मतलब for each वाला ना. Or you can unmute yourself. Okay, yeah. So for each में for each एक ऐसा, it is a higher order function. So it comes with every single like जैसे set हो गया, map हो गया, list हो गया. So with every ऐसे data structure के साथ एक for each करके आता है. For each higher order function है. So you'll learn more about these objects and all in the next session. So यहाँ अभी क्या है, ये for each है higher order function. और इसके अंदर I have passed this anonymous function. ये. I'll copy paste this over here. ये फंक्शन है, इट इज एनोनिमस फंक्शन क्योंकि इसका नाम नहीं है कुछ. सो आइटम इज ईच एंड एवरी आइटम इन दिस लिस्ट. So for each will basically run this anonymous function on each and every item of this list. One will be passed to item and output.add. So output is another list. So this function will basically add, square करेगा वो item को और add करेगा output में. So this is the anonymous function and for each is the higher order function. Thank you. So okay. So was I able to solve your doubt? Okay. Can you give a short tour? Yeah, sure I can. So firstly we started with variables. In variables, what you need to remember is this var keyword. That is, it is a wildcard way of declaring variables. And apart from that, these data types, that is int, double, string, and bool. So, and then we have the const and final variables. So in case I don't want the value of that variable to change in any time in future or in the code, अगर मैंने normally कोई variable declare किया, var a equals to 12 and a equals to 13. So this is allowed. But if I declare it as const, so this is not allowed. This will show compilation error. या constant का final भी डाल दिया फिर भी. So that was constant final variables. So these are certain rules that you must follow. कि उसमें white spaces नहीं होनी चाहिए variable name में. And no other special characters are allowed other than underscore. And the variable name should start with a string, that is an alphabet followed by numbers. And keywords cannot be used as variable name. जैसे int, double, string, ये सब keywords है. That is, they already have some meaning in the meaning given to them by the compiler. So I cannot use them as variables. So these were the rules. Then we looked at the control flow statements. That is first if else, then loops, break and continue, switch case and assert. Then we went through each one of them. If else me this is the syntax for the if else. We did this exercise. I'll give each and every code. मैं slide में यहाँ पे नीचे code भी डाल के send कर दूंगा Slack पे. So don't worry about that. Then we have loops. We looked into the for loop, while loop and do while loop. Do while loop is an exit control loop. And ये एक बार तो at least execute होगा ही do while loop. And after that, after checking the condition, if it is false, the loop will terminate, else it will keep on running. So then we did this exercise. That is from 1 to n. We went to each and every number and checked whether they are a multiple of 2, 5, both or none. Then we looked into the break and continue statements. Continue basically skips the iteration. Break terminates the loop. Then we went through switch case. Switch case is basically a series of if-else statements. This is the syntax for that. अगर a का value किसी भी case से match कर गया, so that will run, that the code that is defined below, it will run, and then break statement will basically like ये block terminate हो जाएगा switch case का. So only one case will run. Then there is assert. So assert, in case this condition given over here is false, this message will be displayed and the entire program will be terminated. And अगर assert के नीचे कुछ और statements होंगे, so they won't run. Then we looked into functions, the different kinds of functions, the return type of a function, then the parameters. What are parameters? They're basically the means through which we pass in data to that function, and the return type of a function. Then we did this exercise, that is write a function to add two numbers and return their sum. Then we looked into some more inbuilt data types, that is list, sets, and maps. So list can hold multiple data of similar or different types. Then we looked into sets. Sets hold data of unique type. Okay. Yeah, okay. So there was some problem on my side. Then we looked into maps. So what maps store data in key value fashion. That is corresponding to every unique key there is a value. Key is unique. We need to remember that. Then at last we looked into anonymous function. That is function which don't have a particular name. They are used to pass a set of instructions to another function through their parameters, which is known as a higher order function. Then we looked into the for each function of lists, and then we concluded. So that was all that we covered today. Just a second.
Okay, so hello everyone. Let's take Soumya's doubt. Is Flutter paired with HTML and CSS to develop website just like JavaScript, or does it work on its own? It completely works on its own. So we would be having some things like widgets in future when we will learn Flutter. So it is not at all related to HTML, CSS. Obviously, it is rendered into HTML after like compiling, you can say. But we don't have to directly use HTML or CSS. All right. So, okay. So I am sharing the doc link in this meet, the presentation link, and that's it. That's it for the day. So if you have any doubts, you can definitely ask. That was Aryan behind me.
Yeah, and we would also encourage that you be active in the Slack channel. We'll be sending the link to that group on our WhatsApp group. The link to the Slack channel, we'll be sending that on the WhatsApp group. So Pranit, how can we join the group? Which group are you talking about? A Slack group? Yeah, we'll be sharing its link on our WhatsApp group. Oh, you're not in the WhatsApp group? Oh, okay. So I believe you must have done your RSVP. So from on your email, we will send the Slack invitation link to you. Okay.
Anyone any doubts, we will be there in the meet for like around next 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. By the way, just a frank question. Were any of you in the college today? Anyone visited?
Oh, okay. As many people are not in the WhatsApp group, what I'll do is I'll share a Excel file or a doc file, and you can add your names to that, your names and email IDs. So,
Okay, Riddhi has sent the WhatsApp groups.
okay. So you can join that.